So I have started the recording, and today we'll start a new topic. We have come to a closure of the topic of diodes, and I have explained the actually the physics behind the diode, as well as how to use them, how that physics leads to the characteristics of the diode, and how that characteristics are approximated in order that we can use them to solve circuits. So by pen and paper solution of circuits, we need to do some approximations. But you should keep in mind that there are actually some circuit simulation softwares. So you can also find out the exact solution of a circuit by placing different elements. They may be linear elements or nonlinear elements, like the diodes, and as well as the transistors, and many things that we learn in the domain of electronics. So you can place all these things in a circuit, in a simulator, and run that circuit and figure out what would be the different currents and voltages in the different parts of the circuit. So those sort of simulation softwares are also available. Going ahead, as per your interest and as per some projects that you might be working in, you will come in association or come to know these simulation softwares and how to work with them. However, why we need to, even though these simulation softwares are available, why we need to learn about solving circuits by pen and paper? Because sometimes when we have an actual circuit before us, it is easier to have that circuit diagram and do a very preliminary analysis, almost verbally, using the KVL and KCL knowledge that we have, the basic laws of electronic circuits, KVL and KCL. So utilizing those, we can have a we can analyze the circuit and ascertain whether there is something wrong with the circuit behavior, or the circuit is behaving correctly as per it should. So how it should behave, that we can readily understand by working on a circuit, by simply solving it in pen and paper, utilizing the techniques that we learned. So that is for the in the practical aspect. Of course, from the aspect of examinations, you have to use this pen and paper analysis, because the simulation softwares are not there in our course syllabus or anything. So that is the only way out. So from exam point of view also, that is important for us to practice. So that said, another thing I wish to remind you again, that it is not possible for to cover each and every intricate details regarding a particular element like the diode or the transistor in the lectures that we are having in this course. Because if you look into the book, whether it is a soft copy or a hard copy, you will see that what is the volume of the book. It is very huge. So there are a lot of different things one can read through in the book, and I strongly suggest that you go through the book, so that there are many intricate details, many subtle concepts which are there, even how to read a data sheet, how a data sheet looks like. So, and many different types of applications are also given in the book, which you should cover by yourself. However, the class lecture, how it helps you? It helps you because in the class lecture, the most fundamental things are discussed. So with the most fundamental knowledge with you, you can build your knowledge on top of that. So when the fundamentals are clear, you can actually go and dive into the subject by yourself, and discover the other associated concepts or some other peripheral knowledge about this about the subjects, about these things. But the fundamental knowledge is important. So that is what I am trying to cover, and any faculty would actually do that. So from the part of the students, it is required that you should go back and do your self study with the fundamental knowledge that is discussed in the class. So the self study is very important in every course, not only in my course, but in every course this is important. And you have there are good textbooks in the level of undergraduate program. Textbooks are very nicely written. So if you have hold of a textbook, you should go through that textbook like word by word, sentence by sentence, and that would actually give you a very good understanding and knowledge about the particular subject. So I strongly urge you to do that, and if someone is actually following this, they will really become an expert in these subjects. Whatever subject, whichever subject they do this, they will become much more knowledgeable and have a much more confidence in dealing with that subject in exams as well as in practical life in your engineering career that will be going ahead. So that said, let us now switch to our new topic. We will not discuss diodes anymore unless there is a very important concept, conceptual clarity required to be discussed in the class. If someone raises any doubt like that, poses a question like that to me, and I think that it needs a discussion in front of the entire class, I will surely do that. But if there is nothing like that, we will proceed to the successive topics. So the next topic is transistors, and transistors are of several sorts of construction are there, and first we would be talking about bipolar junction transistor. So as you can see in the screen, this is a bipolar junction transistor. By the name of the device, you may understand that there are two junctions, bipolar junction transistor. So there are two junctions in this device, and this is also a semiconductor device. So the junctions that we are talking about are the PN junctions. So there are doped semiconductor crystals, P semiconductor, N type, P type, and in the diode there was only one side P and another side N and one junction in between. However, in bipolar junction transistors there are two junctions. That means there are three crystals. So you see in the left hand side now, there is an N type, on top of that a P type, on top of that a N type. So this gives rise to two junctions in this entire assembly. In this entire device, two junctions are present, and this gives rise to all the difference between the characteristics of diode and transistor. So let us, with the idea of whatever we have discussed in a diode about junctions, about barrier potential, all those things, they remain the same because the physics remains the same. So the underlying physics remains the same, but the overlying phenomenon which gets arise because of that physics, that underlying physics, that phenomenon becomes different now because there is an additional arrangement. There is no longer a single junction, there are two junctions now. So let us see how this is behaving. So before that, we have to know about some terms. So there are these three parts are having very specific names. So one part is called the emitter, this middle part is called the base, and this part is called the collector. So emitter, base and collector. So there is these three parts, and these three parts are doped differently. The emitter is doped with high density majority carriers. So this crystal has high density of majority carriers. Base is having low density of majority carriers. Also, it is very thin in nature, very thin. So this is a very exaggerated thickness that you are seeing here. The base is very thin. So and then the collector. The collector is moderately doped and it is the thickest part. So its width is the most. So in the transistor. So here the widths are not to scale. So you should remember collector has the maximum width, medium doping, base has the lightest width or the thinnest width and the lightest doping, emitter has intermediate width and maximum doping. So this is the case. Now when these crystals would be on top of each other, these junctions will cause a depletion layer to be formed, as we have already we know that depletion region will be forming because of two different types of semiconductors placed side by side or like that. So then the depletion layers will be formed. So there is a depletion layer between emitter and base, another between base and collector. So two junctions are there, emitter base junction, base collector junction or collector base junction. Two junctions are there. Okay. And you would know that here the direction of the barrier potential. So here it would be like this side is more negative. So in this case, but in this case we are using a NPN transistor. So it can be a PNP transistor also. Here it is NPN transistor. So the base is P type and emitter and collector are N type. It could be PNP as well. So in this case, as you can see, the barrier potential is in this side. So one has, if one needs to make a positive bias, then one should connect the battery of positive potential here and negative potential here. So the barrier potential would be overcome by the majority carriers. And similarly here, the if we want to make the collector base positive forward bias, then one should have the positive potential here and negative potential here. Now how these two different junctions, the emitter base and the collector base junctions are biased, determines the operation of this device. That is very obvious. So because unless we bias these junctions, there would be no flow of current through the device. So no useful service we would obtain from this device. So if we need to obtain any sort of useful service from the device, we need to bias these junctions. So how these junctions are biased determines the characteristics of the transistor. So this is one picture where you can see the one sort of bias. Here what we have done, we have forward biased the base emitter. So this is the emitter, this is the emitter. We have forward biased the emitter base junction, and you can see that here, if you wish to understand what is the bias in the collector base junction, this negative side is affecting this P crystal, and this positive potential of this battery is coming to the inside of the crystal. So this collector base is reverse biased. Collector base in this case is reverse biased. Please bear this in mind. So the emitter base is forward biased, collector base is reverse biased. And when this is happening, then how the current is flowing? So let us concentrate on the majority carriers, which is the electrons in this case. How the electrons flow? So let us try to understand. So when we set up the biasing in this way, then what would happen? These electrons would come to this base. Because it is forward biased, so there is a current in this loop. This is a diode now. So just imagine that there is a diode here. So there is a current here. So it is, the electrons are flowing this way, the current is flowing this way. So the electrons have come to the base region. Now there are two things that these electrons can do. Please remember, there is a very high density of electrons in this side. So the push on these electrons is quite strong from this bias. So the electrons are trying to enter the base region. So they have a very strong tendency to enter the base region because of the forward bias of the electron base junction, emitter base junction. Because of the forward bias of the emitter base junction, there is a strong tendency in the electrons here, in general we should say majority carriers here, to enter the base region. When they enter the base region, there are now two possibilities for these electrons. One is to take this route and another is to take this route through the collector, because there is a positive potential at this end. So here there is a positive potential which is attracting any free electron which is entering this side. Since the base is very thin, constructionally, so when the electrons are entering from this side with a strong force, many electrons would pass through this thin layer and come to the collector region. And when they come to the collector region, they would further experience a attraction force towards this end of the collector, because there is a positive potential appearing there due to the reverse biasing of the collector base junction. If the collector base junction was forward biased, then these electrons would not experience the pull in this direction. So the circuit for these electrons, the circuit through the transistor would not be complete. Yes, this circuit is complete, but this circuit would not be complete if this was not a positive potential or the collector base is not reverse biased. Then this circuit would not be complete. And when this circuit is not complete, then there would be no current in this particular branch. So only this particular branch will have current, this particular branch will have no current. But since we are trying to use the device in a practical circuit, so of course we need a current through and through this device. Otherwise, what is the use of keeping that? Okay, so at some stage of operation, of course, we would require that there is a through and through current through this device, and for that operation to happen, we have to keep a reverse bias in the collector base junction. So bear this in mind. This is something that you should keep in mind, that the emitter base is forward biased but the collector base is reverse biased, and that is what is making the majority carriers flow through the circuit. So both this loop the majority carriers are flowing, and as such a current, electrical current is getting generated. As you can understand, the current's direction is from the collector to the emitter through the base, collector through the base to the emitter, the direction of current, which is very obvious from this particular battery voltage which you are seeing here. The current would be in this direction. Here also the current would be in this direction. Okay. So this particular biasing, this particular arrangement, this is actually any arrangement, that some arrangement I have shown you just to show you what happens when we have forward bias the base and reverse bias the collector. This forward biasing of the base and reverse biasing of the collector can be done in several different ways, or I should say the biasing of the junctions can be done in several different configurations. So we would learn one configuration after another. So there are several three types of configuration actually. So the first one is the common emitter configuration, and this is also called the base bias. So but majorly it is known by the common emitter configuration. This is the major terminology. This picture that we just discussed was the common emitter configuration. Why? Because the emitter side is common to both these input potentials, input voltages. So this emitter side, emitter point was common, as you can see. So that is why it is called common emitter configuration. And you can see the same circuit, this same circuit we have drawn here by replacing the transistor with a symbol. So we cannot draw this type of thing again and again. There is a symbol for the transistor. So the symbol is like this. Symbol is like this. Mostly this is the symbol. In the case of NPN, in the case of NPN transistor, this is the symbol. This is the symbol for PNP. PNP is different. This is going out. Yes. What is this arrow showing? This arrow is showing the direction of current. This arrow is showing the direction of current in the emitter base loop, in the emitter base diode. This is the direction of current for NPN, and if it was PNP, then these majority carriers would have been the holes. So the majority carriers would have flown in this way, and the direction of current would also have been this if it was PNP, in case of PNP. Okay. And in case of PNP, the forward bias of the emitter base junction would have required this battery to be reversed, and the reverse bias of the collector base junction would have required this battery to be reversed in direction. Please keep these things in mind. So these are very small things that you might miss. So we are discussing NPN transistor, and if I ask you to draw a common emitter configuration of a PNP, you may just change the symbol, but that is not sufficient. You have to change the direction of the biasing voltages also. So keep this in mind, and the direction of the arrows are something that you should keep in mind. there is a like a shorthand for remembering this. So you can remember NPN as not pointing in. If you remember NPN as not pointing in, you can understand the direction of the current, direction of the arrow here. It is not pointing in, and for PNP it is pointing in. So the where it is pointing, in that manner you can remember, maybe not pointing in and pointing in. So now let us analyze the common emitter configuration. This analysis is very simple. It is simply KVL KCL equation. So when we have the transistor here placed in the circuit, what are the different voltages that we are trying to get, trying to measure? So the voltages that we are trying to measure, voltages and currents we are trying to measure, depends on the exact circuits, the loops that we have formed in these circuits. So this is one loop, this is another loop. In this particular loop, what are the voltages and currents that are known? VBB is known because this is the biasing potential that we have set up. RB is known because this is the base resistance that we have given here in the circuit. This potential, there is a potential between base and emitter. This is the junction potential, VBE. This junction potential is known or not known? Can anyone say? This junction potential?
Known.
Known, because this is nothing but a diode here, and we know the junction potential of a simple diode. It is 0.7 volt for silicon material, 0.3 volt for germanium. So if nothing is mentioned, we can consider this to be 0.7 volt. As you can see, 0.7 volt. And if you consider this is ideal, then you can consider 0. But in case of transistor, mostly we consider the simplified model or the second approximation, where we consider VBE as 0.7 volt. So this circuit is complete. In this circuit, what are the known variables and what are the unknown variables? VCC is obviously known because we have set this up. RC is known because we have connected this in the circuit. VC is not known. VC is the potential between the voltage between the collector and the emitter. You see, this point is the collector point, this point is the emitter point. The total voltage across the transistor. So this is as if the total voltage across the transistor, that is not known to us. Here would be a current IB, which is not known to us. Here also there would be a current which is IC, that is also not known to us. So with the help of different known and known variables, how can we calculate the unknown variables? Very easy. You see, in this loop everything is known apart from IB. So you can simply calculate IB using the KVL. IB is VBB minus VBB minus VBE divided by RB. So that is the thing. So this is now this is known, VBB is known, VBE is known, RB is known, and you can simply put VBE as 0.7 volt and get what is IB. Here I should mention this, that RB is very high. RB is very high because we wish to have this IB is very small. I forgot to mention this actually, that in this configuration there were two routes for the majority carriers. One was through the RB resistance in the base circuit and another through the collector in the collector loop. There is a base loop and a collector loop. So we wish to pass the maximum current in the collector loop, okay, and very small current in the base loop. So in any case, the base current is quite small because most of the majority carriers will pass in to the collector and very few will come in this direction. but even then, to limit that flow also, we put this RB very high, so that we can get a maximum or the most of the majority carriers are passing through the collector. That the reason why this is called emitter is because it is emitting the majority carriers and this is collecting the majority carriers. So that is the reason for them being called emitter and collector. What is base? I really don't know why the name of base has been given, but these are nomenclatures. So this is how we restrict the base current. So RB is typically very high. Now you may try to solve this parallelly in your copy. Let us suppose that your VBB is 20 volt. Suppose it is 20 volt and RB is suppose is 2 kilo ohm. RB is 2 kilo ohm. Then what would be IB? You can calculate something, you will get IB in the range of milliamperes. You will get IB, I guess. So I don't remember exactly, but when you look into the textbooks, maybe RB is in the range of mega ohms probably. I am not very sure, but anyway, you can see that when you are looking into the book. But right now you can calculate something, that something IB you will get. So this is the equation. Now there is a concept of current gain in the common emitter configuration. This current gain beta, this is a parameter for the diode, for the transistor itself. Current gain beta is a parameter for the transistor. When the manufacturer is making this, they will give you a beta which is given as HFE. HFE in the data sheet. You will find a parameter HFE in the data sheet. That is the current gain IC by IB, and which we nomenclature wise we call this as beta or beta DC. IC by IB. So this means that in the transistor, if we have a base current, some base current, then the collector current will be beta times the base current. This is as per construction of the transistor. So when you know this beta, this will be given to you, then you can calculate the IC straight away as beta into IB. So you get the IC current here. When you get the IC, then you can calculate VCE, because VCE will be VCC minus RCIC, that would be VCE. So you get the VCE, you get the IC, and this VCE, this particular VCE IC gives you the Q point, the operating point of the transistor. So if you are asked to find out the operating point or the Q point of a particular configuration, you are asked to find out the IC and VCE values. Please bear this in mind. The output current, IC is the output current, because this current is going out of this transistor to an outside circuit. This is the current which is going out of the transistor, IC. This is the output current. VC is the voltage across the transistor, the output voltage across the transistor. So the output characteristics are the characteristics of VCE versus IC, and the operating point is the particular VCE IC value, IC pair at which the transistor is operating. So this gives you the Q point. When you get this VCE IC, then you can calculate the dissipating power of the transistor. Obviously now it is true that this IC is not flowing all through and through the transistor, because it is only in the collector base region. Then in the base emitter there is also the base current. So the emitter current, if you say, there is something called the emitter current, which in this particular place we have not shown, but there is a, what is this coming, there is a IE, there is a IE which is nothing but IB plus IC. So in some part of this VCE, IC is there, in some part of this VCE, IE is there. So technically PD is not equal to VCE by VCE IC, but it is very close. We can approximate it as VCE IC. Why? Because the IB is negligible. IB is very less compared to IC. So this IE you can approximate to be IC for all practical purposes, and this PD is VCE IC, dissipating power. There is also a specification in the data sheet which is the maximum dissipating power. So you should be careful that your operating point is not in such a pair where the VCE IC is more than this PD max. That one needs to be careful about. So you can complete this exercise by assuming some VCC. So let us assume VCC as 15 volt maybe. So this one we assumed as 20 volt. This you assume as this also you assume as 20 volt. Then you see some value of IC you will get. IC is already obtained. Some value of VCE you will obtain. Considering RC, consider RC as 1 kilo ohm. Consider RC as 1 kilo ohm. These are just for example for your purpose of doing the practice. In actual examples, or when you read the book, you will get more proper values of RB and RC, which are really used in practice. There is something called the derating factor. This is an important factor to be considered in transistors. Derating factor. Derating factor is what? When the transistor is operating in a particular temperature, this PD max is specified for the operating temperature of normal operating temperature, which is 25 degrees centigrade. Now when the temperature increases, then the maximum power dissipation capacity of the transistor decreases. So as the temperature increases, the maximum, this PD max is decreasing. By what factor it is decreasing? That is the derating factor. That is the derating factor. Suppose derating factor is, suppose this derating factor that is equal to 5 milliwatt per degree centigrade, and suppose this PD max was 200 milliwatt at 25 degree centigrade. So the question may be asked that the temperature is 30 degrees centigrade. So what would be the PD max? So when it is 30 degrees centigrade, there is a temperature difference of 5 degree from the nominal. So yes, the PD max at 30 degrees centigrade would be 200 minus 5 into 5. Yes, 175 milliwatt. Now you should be careful that your operating point, the PD of the operating point should not cross this, because it has come down. Previously it was 200, now it is 175. So you should again recheck that your dissipating power has not crossed this. If it crosses, that means the transistor will be destroyed. The transistor will be destroyed in that case. So this is a more or less overview of the common emitter configuration. Okay, common emitter configuration. Now a certain some points are there. This IE equal to IB plus IC. There is also a parameter which is called the alpha parameter. So this alpha parameter is your IC by IE ratio. Actually this let me define it in a proper manner. This is the current gain. Okay, this is the current gain is from IB to IC, but there is also a parameter called alpha, which is the ratio between IC and IE, collector and emitter current. This is in the range of 0.99 typically. So because I already explained that IB is very less compared to IC, so IE and IC are almost same, but still there is a difference. So alpha is, there is some value of alpha which is almost in the range of 0.99. Now you could calculate the relationship between alpha and beta. So I actually done this for a later topic, but I can show this here. You see the orange part. This is true for a transistor no matter which configuration it is set up in. This is a transistor specific parameters alpha and beta. You set it up in common emitter, you set it up in some other configuration, alpha and beta, the understanding of alpha and beta will remain same. Beta is IC by IB, alpha is IC by IE. In a particular configuration, whatever IB you will be able to calculate, you can multiply it with beta and get IC. In a particular configuration, whatever IE you may be able to calculate, you can multiply it with alpha and you can get IC. So that's why these two parameters are given by the manufacturer, because in particular configurations it will be easier for you to either calculate IB or IE straight away by looking into the circuit, and when you have calculated IB or IE, you will be able to get IC. So anyway, there is a relationship between alpha and beta. Because of this relation between IE, IC and IB, this is coming from the KCL at the inside the transistor. So IE is IC plus IB and IB is basically IC by beta. So you can write it in this manner, and this gives you IE equals to this of IC, and hence alpha would be inverse of this, which is beta by beta plus 1. Alpha would be beta by beta plus 1. So that is the thing. Now after we understand that there is a relationship between alpha and beta, we can talk about something here. What happens when the base current is 0? What happens that when the base current is 0? Will IC be 0 or not? That is the question. When the base current is 0, will there be any collector current or not? Any answer for this?
No, sir.
You are saying
No,
no.
sir.
No. Yes, it seems there should not be any collector current, but let us go back into our understanding of this circuit and look at the transistor as two different diodes placed one after another. Here of course the base current will not be there, but the collector base diode is in reverse bias, so there is a reverse saturation current in the collector base diode, and that would be circulating in this circuit. This we are not talking about when we are writing these ratios, because when we come to this region, we are actually interested in the majority carriers. So we are talking about the majority carriers in this case. Once the majority carriers are in effect, then the minority carriers almost vanish from the circuit, so their existence is we cannot perceive that, it is imperceivable. So that's why we directly use these equations when there is some current IB. But when the IB becomes 0, that doesn't mean, that means that the majority carrier current, majority carrier collector current would be 0, that is true, but there is a minority carrier current, there is a minority carrier current, and that's why we can write this IC. To be more precise, we should write IC as, so I would make a block here with this pen. IC alpha IE plus ICBO. This is the reverse saturation current in the collector base diode. Reverse saturation current in the collector base diode, ICBO. Okay, IC equals to alpha IE plus ICBO. Now this IE is nothing but alpha IC plus alpha IB plus ICBO. This equation is true for all conditions. This is true for all conditions. IC equals to alpha IE plus ICBO. Okay. Now so you can say that IC is 1 minus alpha, you can divide that now in this side, alpha by 1 minus alpha IB plus 1 by 1 minus alpha ICBO. This is true in all cases. Alpha by 1 minus alpha, by the relationship between beta and alpha, you will readily understand alpha by 1 minus alpha is beta. So this is beta into IB, but there is something else. So when IB is 0, this part is contributing to the collector current. It is not simply the reverse saturation current, as you can see. It is a certain times multiplied. That reverse saturation current is multiplied by a certain time, and this is quite high because alpha is quite close to 1. Alpha is around 0.99, so this will be 100 or something like that. 0.99, yes, 100, around 100. Okay, quite high. So if as you know, reverse saturation currents are in microamperes, so you multiply it with 100 times, you get almost like milliampere range. You might get a current 0.1 or 1 milliampere range current you will get, even when the base current is 0. Even when the base current is 0, you will get a quite nominally moderately high, or at least measurable collector current you will get. Though it is quite low compared to other collector currents which we will get when there is an appreciable IB, but still you will get some collector current. So this is the thing that I wish to mention about this different currents in the circuit. So next day we will go into the input and the output characteristics. Before that, I urge you to go into the book once. So Malvino, go into the Malvino because it deals with the common emitter configuration first. In the Boylsted book, they have dealt with the common base configuration, which we have not covered. So you go to the Malvino book. These pictures are also from Malvino book. So you read that in the Malvino book, and this analysis you will get in the Boylsted book actually a bit later on. So we have covered this a bit earlier, but the other things you will get, and you will get some problems, numericals to solve for your own understanding, and you will also get an idea of the range of RB and RC, which I have forgotten actually the exact range, but you can get it in the book if you see that. Okay, and in the exact problem these values will be given to you, but for your own conceptual understanding you should have an idea of what is the range of RB and RC. So this is what I would like to cover for today. So I am stopping the sharing, but there is something I wish to talk about during this lecture. So it is very unfortunate that you are not able to interact with your seniors probably. I am not sure whether there is any medium of interaction with your seniors because you have not come to the campus. But if you get some feedback for my style of teaching or how I interact with the students, you would come to know that normally I talk about many different topics other than the subject that I am teaching, and my interest basically lies in understanding our life and how we live in it from a perspective of the ancient philosophical knowledge that we have in India. And to be more precise, the Vedic literatures that are available, though I have not gone through them shloka by shloka, but I know what is there, and I have come to understand that how they very beautifully reflect in our life, and if we go by them, go by the knowledge that we have there, our life becomes quite easy for us to handle as well as to live by. So that philosophy is something that interests me a lot, and I practice that. I try to practice most of it in my life, as well as I spend a lot of time thinking about it, and so I also try to give out some of that knowledge to my students, whoever is interested to get in touch with that, to come to know about it. Perhaps some of you already have some idea, some knowledge. Some of you might be interested what this thing is all about. We don't know anything about it. Some may be apprehensive. Some so everyone might have their own perspective about this system of knowledge that we had and we still have actually. It is still present, and anyone can follow that. So if whatever your perspective and your thought about it may be, I try to give out some bits, some information or some knowledge in bits and pieces, and also give you some direction on how you could actually follow it and impact your own lives in a positive manner. That impact will never be in a negative manner, that for sure I can tell you. but whether to adopt it or not, that is of course an individual person's decision. So previously I used to talk about it within my class in some during some lecture hours, but it seems that it is obviously that not everyone will have an equal interest in that. So this time I am thinking about to have this lecture in a more coordinated and organized manner with theoretical understanding, as well as to give some practical inputs on how to apply this knowledge in your daily lives. And I will set up a separate hour outside the coursework, and whoever is interested from your batch, whoever is interested in attending this lecture, they can come to that lecture and get an be an audience to it, and when they would take more interest, they can be a regular audience. At least I would urge you to come to the first one or two lectures and try to understand whether it is meaningful to you or not, whether it is meaningful to you or not. If you find this meaningful, you can continue attending, otherwise it is completely your own decision. So saying this, I will share the topic of first discussion and the time and date of it, and also along with a link I would share probably later on. So first I would try to get some interest from your side, so maybe I will share a registration link or something like that, and this I will do for previous batches also. So your seniors, I will also give a link like this, so they have already known this sort of activity I do sometimes. So this time I am trying to make it more regular than the last years. So there will be a lot of people also, you will be invited to this sort of to be an audience and interact in this direction. So whether it obviously depends on your own interest, and I will share the topic and I will share the registration link. After that it will continue. If you wish to be a part of it or not, that is entirely your decision, but I urge you to at least come to the first one or two lectures and try to understand whether this is meaningful to you or not. So with this I would like to end today's lecture, and thank you for being here, and okay, so goodbye. If you have any,
Thank you, sir.
yeah,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So for anything related to the coursework, anything you did not understand today, you are welcome to send me a message or ask me directly in the Teams messaging channel. Okay, thank you.